Good morning. Thank you so much for making it here on the day of the train strikes. So welcome to Protection Review 2023 and welcome back to the wonderful Landmark Hotel. I think this is our 15th year here at the Landmark. It's been a really busy year with differing views on sales, but everybody is feeling like they're running twice as fast just to stand still. But I think you'll agree there's been some brilliant work this year across the sector, including Amy's Protection Viewpoint, IPTF's amazing iPaw, Aviva's claim event, and much more, including various great events from the trade press. However, I see differing views on sales because we all know the country and indeed much of the world is having a really tough time at the moment, and it's a challenging market against that backdrop. Some say sales are up, some say sales are down, some say sales are flat. But what's really happening? Well, our friends at Gen Re have supplied us with some slides, which I'll have a very quick look at here. This is the size of the market as a whole. And I think that's actually quite encouraging. It's not gone down, maybe not gone up massively, but it's a positive result. Having a look at mortality, hasn't gone down. Having a look at accelerated critical illness, AKIC, maybe gone down a little bit. This is the one that really surprised me. An increase in standalone critical illness. And I'm sure that the IPTF will not take any credit for this, but that is the size of the IP market. So from a sales perspective, I don't think things are actually looking too bad, not too shabby at all. So what have we got in store for today? This morning, in just a few minutes, we're going to be talking about technology. Then, after coffee, we'll talk about the number of insurers in the market. How many do we really need and why? And in the afternoon, it's ProtectX Live, which is the bit that I was supposed to be doing myself. And I will be doing that this afternoon. In ProtectX Live, as always, you'll see 7 speakers in quick succession. Each speaker has just 7 minutes. They'll cover 7 different topics. And yep, there's going to be an alarm bell to make sure that they stick to their 7 minutes. Kevin actually wanted a trapdoor, but health and safety wouldn't let us have a trapdoor. And just before ProtectX Live, we'll be sitting down with an old friend of Protection Review to talk about the current political situation in the UK and what we might expect next year if there happens to be a general election. So let me thank you all for being here today. Protection Review's ethos is all about encouraging people to think that little bit differently, and that's what we hope to achieve, as always, today. That spark of an idea, a slightly different way of thinking, a challenge to the current way of doing something. Next year is going to be busy for us as well. We've got 4 events coming next year, and we hope you'll join us for those. In Q1, we'll have ProtectX Online in association with HSBC. In Q2, we will have ProtectZ for the 2nd year running, where each speaker is under the age of 30. In Q3, the Young Achiever Academy, which is a private event, and the only way that you can get access to the Young Achiever Academy is by being shortlisted for the Young Achiever Award. And of course, in Q4, this conference and awards currently penciled in for Wednesday, the 27th of November. It'll still be a Christmas event, even though it's slightly this side of December. So before we hear from our first speaker this morning, I do need to give you a few bits of housekeeping, including the chance to win £500. First of all, we're not expecting any fire alarms, but the nearest exit is just outside the main doors that you came in through. CPD letters and name badges are available on request at the reception desk. We are filming today, but we're not live streaming, and we're going to be putting together edited highlights videos. If you'd rather not appear in any videos, even if it's just a quick shot, just let us know before the end of the day. The hashtag for the event is hashtag #ProtectionReview23. And we'll be keeping an eye on social media and Twitter throughout the day for any questions or comments that people might have put through. And finally, how to win those vouchers. There are £250 worth of John Lewis vouchers, which we'll match for a charity donation of your choice. All you need to do is complete the very brief feedback form by midnight on Friday. There's a QR code on the program that you've all got on your tables. There's also a QR code out at the desk. And lastly, you might have noticed that in the coffee room across the way, there are no stands this year. We're taking a stand against stands. People are fed back. They're a bit fed up with stands. So we have no stands this year. More tables for you to congregate around, more space and more room to network. So talking of taking a stand, it's time to introduce our keynote speaker this morning, Sarah Armstrong-Smith. As the Chief Security Advisor at Microsoft, Sarah Armstrong-Smith operates at the forefront of the cybersecurity industry. She's led a long and impactful career guiding businesses through digital attacks and teaching organizations how to protect their data. Previous roles include the London Stock Exchange, and she has been named as one of the most influential women in UK tech and one of the most influential women in cybersecurity. So a big welcoming round of applause, please, for Sarah Armstrong-Smith.
Good morning. That's an entrance, isn't it? I have to flick through some of these slides. Yes, so Sarah Armstrong-Smith, Chief Security Advisor at Microsoft. What's one of those? My role, in essence, is to liaise with Microsoft's largest enterprise customers across Europe. So that's multi-sector and multi-country at the same time. Now, I joined Microsoft just as we were going into lockdown, which was a very interesting time. So I spent the first 18 months of my career on Teams. When we kind of think back over that last 3 years, what a lot that's happened. We've had a global pandemic, followed by the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And because of all the sanctions that went into place, we had an energy crisis, we've had food crisis, inflation has gone up, interest rates have gone up at the same time. But not only that, we've also seen another war with Israel and Hamas at the same time. Arguably, it's still a little bit early for us to determine what the net effect of that. But just when we think about that last few years, the rapid pace of change that we've seen. So we've seen a kind of geopolitical threat, societal, economic, and we've seen a huge increase in technology as well at the same time. So the global pandemic really changed so much. We saw a mass acceleration to the cloud. We've seen hybrid working. We've seen advances in smart technologies, AI, and all of these things together. And I think when we look back, we can really argue that we've really been resilient. So we've been able to kind of deal with all of these things at scale, at mass. But the thing about resilience is the whole point of resilience is your ability to deal with these things and then bounce back. But actually the pace of change that we're after requires us to be at a tempo that's running really fast all of the time. And that's kind of where this idea of perseverance comes into play. The problem is we're humans and we're not designed to run at speed and at full pelt all of the time. And in actual fact, in the last 3 years, we've seen a huge increase when it comes into mental health, people dealing with stress, and all of those things that are kind of manifesting in the way that they do. So we really have become dependent on technology as the ability for when we have fatigue, the machines don't. So we need them to almost kind of take over and run at pace. And we kind of have this principle, what we call digital perseverance in essence. So that's really thinking about the opportunities that technology have from a scientific perspective, medicine, insurance, and for whatever kind of things we're thinking about? How do we embrace technology? And one of the key things in the last year as well has just been that increase in AI. Now, you're probably in two camps when you're thinking about that. So you're probably in that AI, how exciting, what's the art of the possible? The other camp is, please, for the love of God, can you stop talking about AI? But I'm sorry, I'm going to have to talk about it. But I want to just kind of start, let's just get on the same page of what we're really talking about. Well, AI is nothing new. In fact, we've been talking about AI since the 1950s, and it was really envisaged right back then. What if someday we could have machines that could mimic humans? And that was the whole principle of AI. It kind of got a little bit hard and difficult, and so nothing really happened until there's kind of the 1990s, when we then have machine learning. And when we talk about AI today, what we're really talking about is machine learning in essence. And it's the ability to find patterns, ability to kind of utilize data at scale. We then had a subset of machine learning, deep learning, those kind of neural networks, being able to connect all of those things together. And in the last 2 years, we've seen generative AI in particular. And that's where we've had these large language models that have been able to take huge amounts of data and really kind of take it to the next level. So take text, turn that into videos, turn a video into text. That's kind of been really brought about, I think, with ChatGPT in particular. And we'll kind of have a little bit of discussion. But what's the real difference? What are we talking about? Now, if you think about machine learning, classical machine learning, and its job is to find the patterns in the data. Now, if I'm thinking about what's the difference there for generative AI, in essence, it's to index all of that data, no matter how many books, no matter how many resources we're talking about, to collect all that data and be able to utilize it. So what has changed? We've been talking about AI since the 1950s, and we've been developing machine learning since the 90s. Why now? What is really making the difference? And why are we having this conversation about generative AI in particular? And what kind of makes the change? What makes this real is to have this level of capability. You need huge amounts of computational power, and you need huge amounts of data. Now, I'll address a little elephant in the room when it comes to Microsoft's relationship with OpenAI. It's not a secret we have invested over $10 billion into that. We've also built the supercomputer that runs OpenAI into Azure. And you can imagine how powerful a supercomputer is. Build that into the cloud, you can currently see how much data, how much computational power is available. Now, the supercomputer is now the 5th biggest supercomputer in the world and continues to grow at scale. So we think about OpenAI in particular. The whole purpose of it is open. So think about open source software, open code. ChatGPT itself was actually built off the internet. So it actually took the entirety of Wikipedia. Now, just a little thing to think about there when we think about where the data sources have come from. And even Wikipedia itself is not necessarily known for being a credible source of data. But that being said, ChatGPT came with so many promises, and it's the fastest growing application in history. It reached 100 million users inside 3 months. It's now got 1 billion users, and that number continues to grow. So ChatGPT came with so much promise, so much potential about how it was going to change the business and how it was going to do all of these things. But quite early on, we started to see the cracks appearing. It was hallucinating, it's making things up, it's full of bias, it's racist, it's misogynist, it's doing all of these things. Actual fact, the machine itself, the algorithm is doing none of those things. In actual fact, it's highlighting our biases, our issues that we've come. But we were quick to really then think about how are we going to manage this? So we were calling people cheaters. How dare you use this technology to get advances? How dare you trying to write an essay or trying to write a paper? And you're kind of utilizing this technology for all the wrong reasons. And we tried to ban it. So a lot of companies, let's just ban ChatGPT completely. Let's ban all of the kind of generative AI tools. The problem is that doesn't stop its use. In actual fact, people just want it more. Because as soon as you say no, I want it more. Imagine being a kid and being told, no, I can't do all of these things. You're just going to do it anyway. Then we have shadow IT. People aren't going to stop using technology just because you say so or try and ban it. And humans, they're really tenacious. That's something we do know about people. Where they find a will, they find a way. And all of a sudden, people are starting to think about, how do you find all these workarounds? How do you use the technology? And how am I going to bypass the controls and do all of these things? But society itself really started to kind of ask the questions, are we really ready for this technology? Are we going too fast? In actual fact, there was a consortium raised against OpenAI with various different tech companies and entrepreneurs saying, we have to slow down. We're not ready for this yet. And in actual fact, the Microsoft president said, no, we have to speed up. So for all the people who want to slow down, there are just as many companies, just as many countries who are speeding up. Now, the challenge is the fact that, as we know, regulation always takes too long. And that's what we need to speed up. We need to get everybody on the same mindset, everybody in the same area. But it does beg the question, though, as machines behave more like humans, what is the real impact? And are we prepared for that in particular? So the media kind of doesn't help the matter in essence. So they like to amplify the risk. So as much as we're thinking about all the good that AI can do in terms of improving business, we said science, medical breakthroughs, all of these things, this is the kind of the go-to that we always kind of see. We instantly jump to the end of humanity, Terminator's coming, and how things are just going to end any minute soon. I just want to give you some perspective on that as well. So last November, I was invited to attend a live show with Sky News, and it was all about the future of technology. So with regards to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, I was asked to speak about cyber warfare and how technology was going to change the battlefield. Now, one of my colleagues who works in Microsoft Research in Cambridge was invited to talk about AI. Now, our research division really is scientists. They're data scientists, they're technicians, not just thinking about AI, but quantum and various things. It's really, really clever people working on some of these things. The first question they asked him to comment on was the rise of killer robots. And so I was just like, of all the things you could have asked, all the things you could have talked about. But let's be honest, there are risks, there are issues. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of these in particular. Now, does anyone remember Tay? I'm not expecting you to remember Tay. She only lived for 24 hours. But in essence, back in 2016, Microsoft created a chatbot to go on to Twitter. Now, Tay was designed, in essence, to be like a 19-year-old, hip, trendy girl who was going to, when you speak to her, in inverted commas, she was going to learn about you, she was going to understand your mannerisms, she's going to be your friend. But however, as I said, humans are really not that nice in terms of what they do and how they do it. And I think about ChatGPT and how people have tried to poison the algorithms. They're asking questions, how do I kill all humans? How do I make a bomb, in essence? And that's exactly what they did to Tay in 2016. And then this is kind of what happened in essence. So people were feeding her really horrible information, asking really horrible things. And in essence, what happened was the kind of people were asking questions and various different things. So someone said, "You are a stupid machine. Well, I learned from the best, and you are dumb too." Oh dear. Not the greatest thing. So Microsoft actually turned Tay off. That was the life of Tay. But it really does bring about some valuable lessons about not just allowing technology loose. Let it do its own thing and we kind of figure it all out. So Microsoft, in essence, created their responsible AI principles. And the underpinning principle, if you like, is about accountability and really being accountable for what you put out in the world. And when something goes wrong, what are you going to do about it? There's then the principle of having about transparency. And that's really being able to explain that dark box technology, what's really going on, how does it work, how's it coming up with its responses. And then it's about being fair, because we talk about having bias. Word of note, you'll never, ever get a machine not to be biased because it's built by humans. We all have an inherent bias, unconscious bias, all of these things. And then you're well, we've got to work out what's right from wrong, but right from wrong according to who? So we need to accept some of these things, but we then have to think about reliability, security, privacy, as well as being inclusive at the same time. The principles are great. I can write whatever I want on a piece of paper, and I can have these principles, and I can plaster them all over the company, but actually don't mean anything unless you actually put them into practice. So you have to actually do some work. You actually have to build policies, processes. You have to train people. You have to test these systems, and you have to really consider how much testing is enough for us to be able to build some of this capability. And it's open to interpretation. So we've got to be really transparent again about what we're talking about. And we have to address the how. Now, what we came up with is some really sensitive use cases that we really had to consider. So all the things, all the myriad of possibilities, what really is it that we're talking about with regards to that consequential impact, physical, psychological injury, or that threat to human rights, in essence, breaking someone's privacy. And I think this is really important from a protective insurance perspective. Get it wrong, and this could have dire consequences for those individuals who are reliant on the insurance policies that you are providing to them, whether that's life insurance, critical illness cover, or whatever that can be. So those sensitive use cases really, really apply in the environment that we're talking about. And the real debate about today is really understanding, acknowledging the gravity of the situation that we find ourselves in, but also not just looking at the risk, but also the opportunity. Now, we've been here before when we think about GDPR and all the issues that came about with privacy, data exposure, hoarding data, and all of these things. Now, this is quite interesting. Back in 2016, when GDPR was being talked about and being debated, somebody actually created an artwork in the US. And what they basically did is they printed out all of the T's and C's, privacy policies from some of the social media companies and laid it all out on A4 paper. So some of this is Instagram, it might be Facebook, Twitter, and various different things. You can see who is actually going to read all of these things. Let's be honest, but you're so reliant on something in the small print that you assumed and hoped that somebody has actually read because they pressed a button. And this is really dangerous when we think about, even from an insurance perspective, all the policies that you have, all the exclusions, all of the kind of things that you're expecting people to sign up to. And the challenge, I think, as well, is when people are buying these policies, they're not really thinking about what's going to happen over the next 25 years. Sometimes it's born out of necessity. I'm buying my first house, maybe I've had my first child, whatever the case may be. I have to have this thing. So I'm just going to go for the cheapest, I don't know. But I'm now bound to this policy potentially for 25 years. Now the challenge then comes down to, as I say, being accountable for some of those outcomes. And the thing is, where's the data coming from? What algorithms are you utilizing? Are you building? Are you buying? I mean, we already know that rubbish in is rubbish out, but the problem is with some of these things, it's just being amplified to such a degree. So what are we really talking about? Now, people of a certain age may remember kind of Little Britain and this kind of whole thing is computer says no. But actually think about it. So Little Britain was maybe 15, 20 years ago. It's pretty funny to think about it. But actually think again, a computer says no. How dangerous is that when the machine itself is saying no? How do we counteract that? Do we really understand when the machine is saying no, what does it really mean? So there's some things to think about when we're thinking about, well, how do we build the trust? How do we get the trust back? So we have to think about the security, and from kind of an adversarial AI perspective, this is real hot property for a number of cyber attackers. Because if I can get access to that black box, if I can understand the algorithm, I can flood it, I can reverse engineer, I can steal it for my own purposes. So it's really about understanding the threat landscape. What's new, what's different, how are they evolving? How are they evolving their tactics and their techniques? And we kind of have to share and be really open about where we've had instances of cyber attacks, data breaches, and those type of things in particular. The next thing is about privacy. We talked about the human right of privacy. It has not gone away. So we've got to kind of think about how do we remove the rot, that redundancy, the obsolete, the trivial data that means nothing to anybody, but put all of that into the mixing pot without any context, and we can really see how we can be skewed into thinking that the outcome is right because the machine said so. And how do we protect that data? How do we protect privacy? So it's about having privacy as a default setting. Then we're going to think about the ethics in particular. So we talked about societies changing in terms of their acceptance and their expectations. What are they thinking? What are they expecting from you in terms of how much you're utilizing this new technology, again, how you've tested it, how you've deployed it? And everyone kind of says, oh, we're waiting for the regulator to do something. Well, remember what we said about GDPR and how long that took? 3,000 iterations for GDPR to come in. So you can imagine the difficulties that regulators are having right now, even trying to understand AI, let alone trying to figure out how to actually regulate it. So that being said, we're still utilizing it, so you still have to have codes of conduct, whatever those codes of conduct might be. And again, how are you utilizing that between you? And then we kind of think about those human risk factors and having that empathy. So when computer does say no, how do people challenge it? Can they challenge it? Can the people review it? Do they understand it? Can they override it? Because as we said, there are some real human consequential impact if we get it wrong and we don't do what we said we were going to do. So we have to be really cognizant of that. But if we get it right, where's the opportunities? What might this look like? We have technology, we have capability that's inclusive, we're protecting the human rights. It's going to be sustainable, but ultimately it's going to be trusted. And that's the key. And that's really what we're going to be talking about today, is how do we remove the fear, how do we remove the risk, and how do we really embrace that opportunity? So thank you so much. I hope that's been interesting, enlightening, giving you something to think about. I know for the next session, it's all about debate. Hopefully some of this will come up. So enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you very much.